Twitter blurring the lines now between the personal and the professional, and does that matter?
Yeah,
because your identity, you know,
it does matter. I mean, you're out there and you're saying something publicly, you're publishing. We use it a lot, obviously, for all of our services, etc., and they're always on, and it's a really, really important part of engagement. But you know, if you tweet, you are going public, and it's fine to say, well, I'm you know, not being my professional persona and my views are my own, but the reality is you are who you are. So that's a risk you have to take, and that's something that you need to consider.
And there are risks. You know, there's all the stories out there of people who've tweeted the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Yeah, but I think that's the point as well, you know, certainly for me. And I think it's important that people do make mistakes, because this obsession with, you know, you're never going to make a mistake, government's never going to make a mistake. People make mistakes all the time. Government makes mistakes all the time. Companies make mistakes all the time. So this obsession with perfection, you know, doesn't help us. Far better to make a mistake, and it's how you handle that mistake that defines you. So if you do something stupid, and we had one of our permanent secretaries who had just recently gone onto Twitter, accidentally retweeted something and took it down. And I thought, is that going to mean he's not going to stay on Twitter? And the great thing was he just kept going, right? And so in terms of people understanding him to be a human being, that was a really good thing. So I think you've got to measure that. I have, you know, 80% I tweet is probably work and 20% is probably personal. Okay. But I am aware that I am a civil servant, and I'm a civil, you know, somebody can triangulate me, and saying views my own isn't really going to cut it with the Daily Mail. So you've got to be careful, right?
And I know you got some of the civil servants to tweet. I mean, how did you get them to tweet, and why do they tweet? What is the business reason behind it, or is there one?
Well, the head of the UK Civil Service is Sir Bob Kerslake, and he had been travelling around the country a lot, visiting civil servants in different parts of the country. And one of the things that struck him was that people would say, I work in land registry, or I work in Department of Education, or I work in, you know, in vehicle registration. And he was saying, well, the civil service is a really good brand. I really want to unify people under the brand. And the advice from some of his existing civil servants was, well, you should tweet as HOCS, H-O-C-S, head of the civil service. And he said, don't be ridiculous, right? I mean, people don't identify with institutions, they identify with people, so I'll go out as Sir Bob Kerslake, that's who I am. And he was great, and he wanted to show visible leadership, and he wanted a unifying, visible force. Now, Bob doesn't tweet a huge amount, but it's fantastic that he's there. Yeah. And the main blockers were not Bob himself, but the people who were most concerned, and I think this is, I don't know if colleagues would feel the same, are corporate comms and private offices, right? Because corporate comms are just freaked out that he's going to go on, or, you know, any senior person's going to go on and suddenly turn into a lunatic, right? So, you know, they're the battles I've had, really, is you know, corporate comms are stuck in this command and control model, right? And we're not in that world anymore.
The control thing is quite interesting. You know, sort of until very recently, some organizations, I'm not naming which, didn't allow all its employees to actually use the internet. You know, that was going to be a difficult thing to cope with. What if they start using the internet when they should be working? So freeing up and trusting people far more to do their jobs is part of the new way we're going to live, I think. So, you know, we don't have a tweeting policy, but perhaps and I think actually coming out with a policy will be rather constraining.
Yeah.
We do have a social media policy for a number of reasons. We're a public service broadcaster. It's very important that, you know, we fulfill our obligations, etc. But also, you know, we don't want to scoop ourselves necessarily. So there has to be a framework. We let people tweet and use social media, but we have an editorial framework and a social policy framework, or a social media policy with regard to what the guidelines are and what they should or should not do.
Because obviously they could tweet the news that's going to hit the 6-1, and that wouldn't be good.
You
want to avoid that.
I think you have to remember, you already have policies and frameworks in your organisation. You already have confidentiality clauses and so on. And so you absolutely do need to have governance. The level of governance is going to depend on the sector you're in, the industry you're in, the culture of your organisation. And there are still some people, perhaps some here in the room, who actually don't have free access to the internet. I know I come across that every single day. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, that's the reality, whereas you have other organisations that are much more open. However, those organisations who have been more embracing of it and have actually learned through mistakes, as you talked about, have actually also found that if you put that in place, you actually have all of those voices from your organization. Your people can be ambassadors and should be ambassadors if they're proud of your organization.
Yes.
And we can do that in the real world when we're talking to people, but we can also do that through our networks.
There is quite a generation divide, and it's simply the fact that you see kids now who even, like I remember dial-up internet, and that was a big, childhood trauma for me. And then there was, but you see kids now who have no understanding of that or don't know what it is, and but they'll be more. I mean, they've grown up with all this around them, and they'll be more proficient. And there's no time wasting about how to save a file or basic interaction. And in terms of it, they're much more, I don't know, they're more open to embracing things. So being on like Ask FM or Facebook or Twitter and so on, they embrace it more, and they see no issue with tying their real world identity with their online identity. And simply because they've grown up in this world where this is the acceptable thing. And I mean, people, it's maybe not so much as embracing it, but more so understanding what it is and understanding what the kind of limitation is. So a lot of people are kind of like to their kids about being on Facebook and so on. They say, should we restrict the access? Should we, what about what they post? Should we, restrain their ability to post to these social networks and so on? And it's more so teaching your kid the responsibility that what you're saying here is going on record. You have to, it is quite a, you do have to take a step back and think about what you're posting and generally kind of instill responsibility in what it is. And yeah, so with regards to the thing is, it's difficult for me to speak from a, kind of maybe an older perspective, God, thank God there's nobody old here. But so it's difficult for me to comment, but I most definitely think it's more taking the time to understand it and kind of then, so not so much embrace it, but understand it first.
But I think what you're saying is the next generation, this is what they do, right? So the culture of our organizations is inevitably going to have to change as these people come into the workplace.
Yeah, particularly, and with consumers as well. I mean, businesses should be on Twitter now as a point of contact. As a consumer, it's so much easier for me to contact a business on Twitter, so instead of bringing up, and particularly as well, if I have an issue with a company or business, Twitter is typically the place that people take this angst or ask for help and advice. So it really is these two, and Commissioner can probably talk more on this because this is our speciality. But people should be on Twitter now, and for most definitely what I've seen from my generation and the generation coming, this is the number way they're going to communicate.
Yeah. Very good.
Just add the piece in terms of age.
Yes.
Age is not an excuse.
Yes.
We need to put that aside, right? Age is not an excuse.
Yeah, agreed.
Some of the most digitally savvy thought leaders and authors around digital communications are baby boomers, right? So yes, we've got all ages, but please, I had somebody recently say to me, oh, Krishna, I'm 46. I'm in communications. I think it's all passed me by.
Yeah.
It hasn't. Please stop using that as an excuse.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I blogged about this recently, and I totally agree. Because it's kind of like, when email came in, and people are going, oh, I'll never catch on. I don't think I'm going to use that. And then over time, they just become, sidelined, right? And they become irrelevant. And I think, the important things in business and in government today is, two things really. How authentic are you? And what's your standing in the conversation, okay? And these are important things. And so I think future leaders, are just going to be sidelined, because people will do this stuff and their employees will begin to leverage the power of the network. They'll just do a workaround, all good hackers just do a workaround.
Yeah.
So you're not going to, the generation, your generation, James, there's a very interesting article called We the Web Kids, and it talks about, growing up in the web, So for people who grow up in the web, there isn't one opinion, there's many, from which they filter down and they choose the best one. And if a better one comes along, they'll take that. So the notion of authority and hierarchy, being the levers that you will pull as senior leaders, forget about it, right? I've got a 20-year-old son. His idea of hierarchy is like, are you mad? Right?
Yeah.
So if they will find knowledge where they want it. So as I say, how many people here have seen The Matrix, the movie? Right, you know the scene where Morpheus gives Neo a choice. He can have the blue pill or the red pill. If he takes the blue pill, everything stays the same. If he takes the red pill, he falls down the rabbit hole and sees things as they really are. And I would argue that most governments and big organizations are all madly eating the blue pill. And meanwhile, everybody else is on the red pill, right? Everything looks like the Matrix when you've taken the red pill.
There's a small bit of misinformation in schools with regards to computer science subjects at a third level. So at the moment, you know, computer science has this crazy high dropout/failure rate, which some figure like 40 to 30% of your year is left, of your original first year is left in your final year of computer science. And we're kind of wondering why there aren't enough CS graduates out there. And the thing is that, you know, computer science is typically like a very low points course. It was 380 in UCC, and that's where I was going. In other places, it comes at varying things. But people think that it's all grand by, you know, and this is me trying to be Cork, all grand by, you know, we'll go in and do Word and Excel. I was exiled from Cork. I'm not allowed to go back there as a result of the accent. But they don't realize that there's quite a lot of like low-level stuff, looking at how the machine operates and so on. So that there's this complete, I know, there's a big information gap there, and the increasingly rare breed of career guidance teachers, you know, can't really kind of differentiate between the more technical subjects. And as a society, particularly when we're trying to become the Silicon Valley of Europe and have all these major technology companies, it's important that we get this more key information in schools. And that's one of the things we're
so training for teachers.
Training for teachers, or even getting the teachers to say to the kids that, you know, look, this is quite a large field, we don't know, but, you know, here are online resources, and point them in the right direction to kind of, for the kids to self-educate and choose the path that's right for them, as opposed to trying out a computer course and then realizing it's crazy hard, not what they expected, and dropping out.
Can I give, though, a big shout-out to the teachers?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any teachers here, but they do a great job, and there's some brilliant teachers there who've actually perhaps got their own passion and interest. So one of the things that's happening later on today for me is actually I've got 3 little girls, and my youngest one has actually got an open assembly. And it happens to be all to do with how they've been using digital technology. They had to do a little project, and actually, you know, they've been able to use multimedia and other tools to do it. I've also, in another one of my daughters, their teacher has set up a social network. There are social networks that are available for schools to use. And I know there's a debate going on at the minute around people thinking schools should have phones and social networks banned. But actually, I think this is brilliant what they're doing, because they're teaching really good behavior in terms of, and it's monitored, it's edited, and, you know, the teacher does that and the network does that. And so rather than just saying, let's leave them to make mistakes, it's actually educating from the beginning. So I would like to say thank you to those teachers who do get it.
I found my experience of social media has been 100% positive. I started using social media primarily for my work when I was establishing something called the London Data Store, which was about opening up London's data for entrepreneurs and software developers to use. Now, I'm not a technologist, right? I didn't know very much about data or open data or what an application program interface was. It's an API. And through Twitter, I got to know and reached out and connected with a lot of really, really smart people who were not in government, but who were prepared to help me. So when agencies like Transport for London said, no, we don't want to give you that data feed, it's not technically possible, I had like 100 people I could say, is that technically possible? And they go, oh yeah, you just need to do this. And then I'd ring up Transport for London and say, no, you just need to do this, right? Absolutely incredible. And so when you look at, you know, I think it's important to say on International Women's Day as well, the power of those networks in pushing through the glass ceiling, because people keep struggling internally in an organization and they don't realize, you know, there's a lot of very smart, savvy, successful women out there who I can network with, who everybody can network with to help them in their careers, to look at that kind of mentoring Paula spoke about earlier. And people, when you're on those platforms, there is a presumption to share. And that is a fantastic thing. So you don't need to know everything. I kind of call it cognitive outsourcing, right? So I've only got one brain, right? But if I connect with all of you, I've got many brains. So why on earth would you not do that? It would be my question.
And I can add to that, actually. You know, not only I think the one brain works a lot better and a lot faster. It makes it, I think, life so much easier in terms of being on top of information, etc. You think back to if you had to go research some of the stuff you actually know now, you'd never get there. So, that's kind of contributing to work-life balance because we're better, we're faster, and, we're much more on top of things. So it is actually easier to be much better at your job, which is a big positive.
Majority of us now are connected all the time, and I think it gives flexibility. I think it also can be oppressive in some cases. I've stopped emailing on Christmas Day, but I'm working on stopping sending emails over the weekend. But I think that we have a situation where it can offer flexibility to people with families, whereby they can work at home, they can work. What I experience is that if people need to leave the office at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock, then you have the rush of emails at 9 o'clock when people have put the children to bed or whatever. I think that the always connected way we now live, allows a far richer experience in life. I enjoy having information. I enjoy connecting with people. I enjoy sending emails and getting responses and having that personal relationship. I think the digital world is all about relationships, is all about connecting with people. It isn't about automation. And I think from a AIB perspective, we are using the digital world to connect to our customers, to give them a richer experience.
I use digital technologies to help me learn every day. I love podcasts, I love audio. Video is great, but I really like audio because I can multitask. And I actually have never found being able to access so much knowledge and improve my knowledge and my interests. But I do think that sometimes the amount of noise, the amount of information can just actually almost cause stress. Yes. So I think it's also important to find time at a personal level to unplug.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Paula made a very good point in the introduction in the fact that we're actually the first, generation to be always connected, and I think we're still learning the do's and the don'ts. So it does frustrate me when I sit down on a Sunday evening to get ahead and send 20 emails and I get 20 responses on Sunday evening, which just means my workload on Monday morning has increased. So I think we're still learning how we work in this connected age, and I think we'll figure that out.
But it's also changing behavior because, if you look at, email, right, the one thing I have to say to my staff, do not CC me in unless you want me to do something. And I'm sure it's the same here, but in Whitehall, I've seen 75 people copied into a CC chain. It's like, really? Seriously? Who's going to do anything in that instance? And particularly since I'm a Twitter user, I'm kind of going, guys, could you say it in 140 characters? Really? So I think it's about learning from these tools and changing our behavior so you don't get 20 emails, so we talk to each other more. So I say to my member of staff sitting next to me, emailing me. So we need to get real and change behaviors and learn from digital. So you can boil down a lot of things to 140 characters. You'd be amazed.
But maybe there's a message in that for you, Emma.